Hello and welcome to the Cinema Gold podcast. Today we're breaking down the final release of the Snyder Cut, giving our review of the epic 4-hour film. When fans gathered beneath the release of the Snyder Cut billboard at San Diego Comic-Con a few years ago, a finished version of Zack Snyder's Justice League didn't exist. Sure, there was a rough edit the director kept for his own collection, keeping it from Warner Brothers after being effectively replaced by Joss Whedon during reshoots in 2017. But with unfinished effects, no music, and very little polish, this version turned out to be a glorified assembly cut, which contained everything, plus the kitchen sink. Yet that fact mattered little to fans who demanded more movie, more Snyder, more content. Well, Zack Snyder's Justice League, as it's now called, is here. And if more content is what you really want, you're about to be submerged up to your eyeballs in it. With a running time of just over 4 hours, the Snyder Cut is 4 minutes longer. One suspects Snyder hopes that this is considered a cinematic epic on that scale. The new version even bizarrely reverts to a square frame, foregoing the widescreen format the film's shots were originally composed for, and perhaps coincidentally mirroring recent art house darlings like The Lighthouse and First Cow. But these details are simply affectations, the pretensions of a filmmaker who's otherwise making no hard choices about the excess of comic book gibberish he's assembled. And for all its now mostly finished CG and numbing slow motion, this still very much is gibberish. A movie that ponderousness for poignancy, in which remains an assembly cut so rough you'd be forgiven for wondering if anything was left on the cutting room floor. Despite its cinematic airs, this has ironically become bona fide streaming service content, the kind that's as undercooked or unwieldy as anything else, greenlit solely in fealty to an algorithm. Picking up where Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice left off, Zack Snyder's Justice League is at heart the same dopey story as the theatrical cut. Following Superman's death, the bell has rung, and a computer-generated behemoth named Steppenwolf, now with a lot more spikes on his armor and a gravular voice, has arrived on Earth to retrieve 3 mother boxes. In spite of that Saturday morning cartoon setup, these elements are unspooled at a glacial pace, and with a funeral, funereal self-seriousness as Batman and Wonder Woman recruit a team of superheroes. The newcomers include Barry Allen, Arthur Curry, Aquaman, and perhaps most importantly, Victor or Cyborg. Together they will recite copious amounts of exposition and eventually resurrect Clark Kent from the dead. Also, they'll tease an armada of sequels featuring far-off aliens and heavily foreshadowed betrayals that will never come to anything. As a finished product, the most interesting thing about Zack Snyder's Justice League is how it contrasts with the studio-approved version rushed into theaters by Whedon. While effectively the same story, Snyder's version is the more satisfying iteration, if only because it's so purely Zack Snyder. It is also a noticeably step up from Batman vs. Superman, thanks to concessions made at the beginning of the Justice League's production. Gone is the pseudo-intellectual dialogue about gods and character motivations that better resemble Philosophy 101 papers. Nevertheless, we have a film in which heroes spend as much time posing for some unseen sculptor as they do interacting with one another, and the protagonists still have a uniformly glum outfit. Superman presence, if not outright insidious at times, and Batman again enjoys blowing holes in his enemies, although they're parademons instead of human beings this time. All that said, this is wholly Snyder's vision played to the hilt, with the filmmaker occasionally finding his peculiar brand of grace notes, such as when he puts "There is a kingdom over Aquaman's swim." By contrast, the Whedon cut is further revealed for the Frankenstein's monster it is. Patchwork of unfinished ideas stitched together on a proverbial slab of a studio committee's table. There are elements that work much better here. For example, Lois Lane's grief over losing Clark Kent, and there are others that don't, such as Batman's mentoring of the Flash. But taken as a whole, this is a piece with Snyder's Batman vs. Superman and Man of Steel, and his insistent grandiloquence can at times be charming in its stony-faced earnestness, if still also exhausting. Perhaps the characters who are best served by the extended edition are the hero Cyborg and the villain Steppenwolf. The former was reduced to a handful of cliches in the theatrical version. Here, Ray Fisher gets a lot more screen time and is good in all of it. New flashback scenes still stumble at making the character fully compelling, but Fisher at least depicts a complete arc across the 4 hours. None of his other teammates can say that. Meanwhile, Steppenwolf is given a discernible motivation for retrieving mother boxes, even if it essentially transforms him into a middle management baddie, the supervillain equivalent of a parking valet waiting on the off-screen Darkseid. Indeed, the latter appears briefly as a CGI brute who's built up like Sauron from Lord of the Rings, even as he comes across closer to a mindless cave troll in his first big scene. Darkseid is eventually given a fuller texture as the film shambles along, but then that might be the biggest problem of this iteration of Justice League. The amount of time it takes to get anywhere, divided into 7 chapters, complete with title cards. Zack Snyder's Justice League is structured and more frustratingly paced like a TV series. If it had been released in that medium, then more power to HBO Max. But the refusal to make any attempts to wrangle the material down to even 3 hours means a full 68 minutes will go by before the Flash is introduced, and that will pass before characters reappear. It gives the proceedings a listless, meandering quality, and that includes the action sequences. In the end, Justice League 2.0 breaks the cardinal sin of not committing to anything while indulging everything. Even its new scenes from Snyder's own reshoots last year add nothing to the overall film, other than gratifying the director's worst impulses, which are now unburdened from the restraints of logic or cohesive storytelling. Justice League is now available on HBO Max. And that is our review. Thanks for listening. Let us know your thoughts. And if you'd like to support us, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/cinemagold. Thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow.